let's start that again. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety dates April 8, 1989. Welcome, everybody, to the Keystone Big Book Study Workshop, or the Program of Recovery, laid out by the first 100 men and women. And why don't we open with a bit of prayer, man, just to get a mindset happening here. Mind ourselves what this is all about. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So tonight we're going to see what the book says about 8 and 9. Why don't we do that, eh? We looked at 6 and 7. Ray's on step 6 in his group on Tuesday night, so it'll be indulging in. So we're pretty much in sequence, right? We kind of go along, and it's pretty good. We enjoy it. We enjoy facilitating and chopping up the book and looking at this thing and kind of going through it. You know, so when we kind of look at the preparation here, right, on 76, 77, we kind of get an idea, always more in hindsight than foresight, what this is about, and a constant reminder of and we need it. We really need it, especially when we get over into 11, of how many times it asks us to remind us that there's something else at work in our lives other than just ourselves, right? We think it's just asking, most of us think it's about praying for things instead of asking about things. And sometimes that shift takes a little while, right? We're always praying, for the negotiator. I don't know, any negotiators here? Any bargainers with God, negotiating and kind of bargaining chip and coercion and I'll do this, I'll do that. So anyhow, one of the things we got some visitors looking for money. Good luck with that one. Knocking on the door, you hear the dog barking. So let's look at this, right? So they start using certain words here that a lot of us miss. And if you sat in a meeting, it seems like this is a big rush. And it's not so much a rush as it is a preparation and an experience, right? As you go through it. Me and Ray were talking just before the meeting started. When they use words as "let's look at," to look at something means a preparation before an action, right? All the way through here, there's I call them transition steps, right? Preparation. It prepares you for the action you need to take. And I guess that there used to be like the 6 absolutes or something like that, and we branched them into 12. We kind of, needed to dumb it down a bit and kind of spread it out a bit to get a better comprehension of what's going on here. So when we kind of look at this, they said, we said the 7-step prayer. Now it talks about now we need more action. You notice it didn't say that in 6 and 7. Like the action steps actually say action in it. Right, so it kind of gives you the idea that they must be referring to something. Action, right? Preparation, action. So if you want some homework to do some fun stuff, go through the book and see everywhere it talks about action, and when it talks about no action required, just preparation. Anyways, there's 6 steps that require action and 6 steps that prepare us. So it talks about here we go. Go from here to do your bit. Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. And then they talked about that in the 4th step, right? What's like the 4th step prepares us for the 11th step. So one of the thing, and the 8 and 9 is the foundation step to our lives, right? Is actually, people say 10, 11, and 12. It sounds nice, and it's a good catchphrase, and you sound like you're really smart or something like that. But what happens is, as you go through this, you'll kind of realize that it talks about here in the 4th step, in the fear, it says, let him demonstrate through us what he can do, right? So there's a mindset there that will continue on. So anyways, it talks about, let's look at steps 8 and 9. You want to maybe underline that. Let's look at 8 and 9, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to look at 8 and 9. They're kind of weird, right? So we have a list of all persons we had harmed, which includes people, places, things in that list of harms, right? and to whom we're willing to make amends. So, which is interesting, when we finish the resentment part, it talks about, are we willing to straighten these matters out, right? So the first place that the correction happens of how we look at things, or the amends, actually happens inside of us, right? Are we prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle? Are we prepared to, and people get caught up with my part, or how I was involved in this, right, injustice, or this wrong, or however you want to put it, right? So, we have a list of all persons we had harmed to whom we were willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. See, past tense, right? It's not a present tense, it's past tense, right? We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will. So where do you get, so it's interesting, out of our efforts to live on self-will, where do we see that? We see that in the fourth step, which they started this conversation off back in page 60, where they talked about here, being convinced we're at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Now, we're pretty much convinced of that, right? You've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. Your understanding of you on page 60 and of your understanding on you on page 76 is two different understandings whatsoever, right? Now you're seeing why the world and the people, places that has been treating you the way they've been treating you, and why you've been acting the way you've been acting. Interesting. Now you got to clear, right? So you swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about you, which is a total different picture than what we started. Anybody have a totally different picture of themselves after they finished their 4 and 5 and had their amends list than they did before they started? I remember sitting in the 12 and 12 study, like a lot of you heard my first 11 years in and out. All I did was 12 and 12, and I couldn't see what a lot of people were referring to. They said, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends. In the 12 and 12 study, I'd hear people talk endlessly about that stuff, and it would come to me, and I would have the mindset that I didn't do nothing to nobody that didn't have it coming to them, and I had a couple people still to get even with. So I couldn't see, because I always considered myself a very principled person, the way I grew up, right? If there was backlash or problems, you deserved what you got, right? And let's just move on. And same with me, right? If something happened to me and I was out of line, that was just the cost of doing business or how I was raised in the community I was raised in. So, which is a lot of warped thinking. So, here we go. The effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. So this will be transferred over into 11. Right? We ask till it comes. And so why do I keep on mentioning 11 all the time? And when we're at here? Because we're discussing it here, but as we read through 8 and 9, because what are we doing? We're looking at it. Yes? So we're going through their experience of what they did in their process that we're trying to attempt in our lives, yes? So far we've done exactly the same thing as they have up to step 7. Yes? We've yet to do anything else if you're kind of looking at, if you've just started this thing. So as you start reading through this, you see a lot of different scenarios that they bring their experience, strength, and hope into, yes? And so then when we get over, we're going to cheat a bit. So when we get over to page 83, and everybody talks about these promises, right? And you get people 8 days sober, 15 days, and it says, we think not, like these promises are coming true for them because they're practicing abstaining, and your life's going to get a little better when you abstain. Yes, you're going to shower more, maybe get a job, maybe get a partner, maybe life starts looking good, and then you start thinking you're mistaken feeling good for getting better. So what happens is They start talking about the promises. They start checking this thing off. And they're talking about by the time they're halfway through their process. So as we get into page 84, and we'll cover this, I just want to show you what I mean by why I keep on bringing up 11 all the time, and why we're going to kind of continue to use that as a basis for our 8 and 9. So when we get to 84, it talks about, are these extravagant promises? We think not. Who? The people that put this together. They're talking about their experience, right? They're amazed before they're, right? So we think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. So we see back here in 76, they talk about action and our resistance to that, right? But if I'm going to experience what they're experiencing, there can't be resistance to the things I need to do to liberate myself from the attachment of the things that I've been harboring, the things that have been determining how I think, feel, and react to life, right? The things that I see, what we call display. Anybody have call display on their phone? And when it's certain people, you ever get a certain thought or ideas or kind of a reflection on that person. Like I have one guy that phones me. I said, I'm going to answer the phone, be nice, but he still owes me $2,000. Right, and he hasn't made no attempt. But I'll think about that, and I'll think of punishing him a bit. But I'll answer the phone and try to be nice and see where they're at in their recovery, because it's not that. Does that kind of make sense? The narrator has a script for each person that I answer the phone for. Anybody? And so we have these things for the people of our past too. We have the narrator, we have a script, but we also have a new script, right? And so we need to be willing to work toward the old script to bring about a new experience with these people, places, and things where they don't have the power over us anymore, and even still do sometimes when there's nothing happening. We create the position of allowing these things that continuously happen inside of us because of our attachment to it. In the 4th step, they refer to this, that we permit these things. So we permit the shift in energy, thinking, and emotions within inside of us because of the story we're attached to. And that's kind of, am I reading anybody's mail here? Right? And so because we seem to be, that's why they say, hey, now we know when you're looking at this list, you're going to be really reluctant. Right? How many people were reluctant about 8 and 9 before they even did their 4? Before you even started the steps, it's like, whoa, see how the brain, the resistance is strong with this one, right? We start negotiating before we even do the steps. But when you see your life is on the line here, it kind of gives you a different perspective, right? Is this situation, person, place, or thing, worth my life? That's what it really boils down to. Are they worth my freedom, happiness, and contentment? Are they worth my peace of mind? Are they worth how I conduct myself in the day? Right? So anyways, they're being from, they'll always materialize if we work for them. What will materialize? Our experience with what they're talking about in regards to the promises. That experience will materialize. It'll continue to grow and harvest as we plug away at this thing. And then we'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. So there's incorporation on this side of it, praying for knowledge of His will, going through the motions, and somewhere along the line, when we look back, we see the hand or footprint or fingerprints of God all over this situation. Even though I couldn't see it in the moment, but it gave me the strength to overcome the fear that I was experiencing, right? They talk about, right, we rise above our fear, right? They talk about we all grow, same kind of thing. So that acknowledges the fear is still there, but I have enough faith to allow God to demonstrate through me what He can do. Even though I don't fully understand what's happening, but it's kind of happening. It's like not being able to swim, and then all of a sudden you're treading water and you're thrilled to death with the idea that you're swimming, but you're not really swimming. You're just sustaining yourself from drowning. That's kind of where we're at right now. I'm so thrilled. Everybody's watching. You ever see somebody do a dog paddle like that? The person who's doing a dog paddle is impressed. Everybody around them is going, damn. Damn, get that person a life jacket. Anyways, ready? Underline this. This thought brings us to step 10. This thought. Let's look at this thought, right? It's a continuation, yes? We've read through it, we're reading through it, right? Which suggests we continue. Continue means we haven't stopped. What we haven't stopped is the mechanisms, the mechanics that we learned in 4 that need to become a working part of the mind. The mastering resentment, outgrowing fear, aligning our conduct. If you kind of notice when we did our 4, there was a lot of prayer through there. Anybody ever notice that? And when we stumbled, it was to pause and invite God into it. You may not realize it at the moment, going through your 4, but those mechanics will continue what we're going to. So it says continue to take personal inventory, and there again, continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. As we go along, what? From the time we've done our 4, 5, 6, and 7, as we go along, start making our amends, right? As we go along. Have we started anything yet? Technically, we haven't started anything yet, have we? But they're giving us an idea of a result. Continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. As we cleaned up the past. Have we started to clean up the past yet? Technically, no. We're looking at 8 and 9. You got to look at how the book's laid out, right? The steps are in order for a reason. Yes, they are. Right? That's why it says, let's look at 8 and 9. We don't want you going out unsupervised. We don't want to take it from here, coach. Like, I got it from here. Like, we know what you're like unsupervised. What makes you say that? I listened to your 5. Right? I remember my 5. I remember my 4. That's what my life looks like unsupervised. Anybody? So my 4th step is what a self-willed person looks like, absent of the connection to something greater than myself. Didn't mean I was disconnected, but my awareness to the connection was blocked. So I had to remove these things to realize this thing that was always there. It's like the light switch. Even I walk into a dark room, doesn't mean there's absence of power. It's just the connection isn't on. Right? The power's there, and we realize deep down within us it's always been there. Every once in a while it gets our attention, but we need to be more diligent on the consciousness of our experience, moving from the apparatus of our thinking into the consciousness, where they kind of work in hand, where one leads you into other. They call it the keyway. So, great on. So we're going to read this. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. So it's a continuation of the conversation, yes? Right? This is hard for some people because they were taught different. Right? So watch this. We have entered the world of the Spirit. When did that happen? Well, without our understanding, it started happening. The 3rd step prayer could have been the start of that, because I don't know how exactly this stuff works, but it kind of makes the phone call. Right? I'm talking to the operators, making a phone call, even though I'm not talking to someone on the other line yet. The call's being directed. Yes? God, this is my hair. Here, hello, operator? Yes? Seem to be having a problem. You think you can help me out with this? Yes, we'll connect you shortly. But there seems to be some static in the line. Some of you look old enough, not all of you, but remember those party lines? I don't know, you guys ever have that party line? You'd be on the phone and it'd be recording, and then you're talking between the recording, try to get the number, right? You get the number, wait for the recording to go or talk to me. Anyways, when I lived in foster care, they used to have all the people were connected to one line, right? And then the neighbors would hear what was going on and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes you'd phone a number and there'd be like 30, 40 people on this one connection, with the recording going, and in between the recordings, everybody would be talking really fast. That's like us. Right? There's our recording going, and then in between the recording of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, there's this moment of, maybe there's, anyways, moving on. So we've entered the world of the Spirit, where they talk about that, where the connection really is the 5th step. So it's funny how they talk about the 5th. Let's look at 6 and 7. Let's look at 8 and 9. They said we've just entered the world of the Spirit. They talked about in the 5th step, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience, right? And when they closed the kind of 164, we've entered the world of the spirit, right? We're in a different fellowship now. We've entered the second fellowship within AA, right? It's the fellowship of the spirit, which is we're connected differently without realizing it. And more we get into 11, the more we'll discover this intuitiveness thing that happens, that we seem to have answers for things that is kind of profound. We'll get into that in a second. What does it say now? This is the first time it tells us new instructions. You ready? Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness of what? We've just entered the world of the spirit. We've just entered a new location. I moved into a new town. What's the first thing you need to do when you move into a new location? You need to grow in understanding and effectiveness. If you're going, right, where's the store? How do I get to the store? How do I get back home? Where's the utilities? Where's the numbers? Where's the resources? Where's the kids going to go to school? So I'll grow in understanding and effectiveness of the new place I've just moved into. Yes? How many people's had to write their address down? Or you get a new phone number. How many people's had to write their phone number down? I'm growing in understanding and effectiveness. As you go along, you don't have to write your phone number down. If you asked me right now what my wife's phone number is, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'd have to look in my phone. I still need to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Anyways, move on. So, and if this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our life. So they're giving us a synopsis and overview. Yes? No? How long should this continue? It should continue. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue. Here's the recipe, the theme. Remember in the 4-step when we did the fear, the breakdown prayer was acknowledge that something's happening, pray, bring God into it, and redirect. Ask for the right purpose or direction. Yes? That was the whole purpose of the 4, wasn't it? To acknowledge when fear, resentment. Okay, ready? Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. These are not the problem. These are a symptom of the problem. The problem is my instincts are starting to get out of whack again, and I'm starting to become an instinct-based individual again. And without realizing, I've disconnected my awareness, but I am connected, but I'm disconnected, right? The operator, the call's lost, but I'm still connected. I don't know if that kind of makes any sense to anybody, but inside there's still something happening even though I've taken over, right? So, when these things crop up, when these things crop up, why would they crop up? Because I'm cleaning up my past. Why would they crop up? As I do my 8s and 9s, do you think I'm going to have problems with the people that I had problem with? Right? Do you think if I'm a little spiritually off, I'm going to start looking at them the way I used to? When these crop up, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. The shift, remember we had to go through a shift in our thinking and how we looked at things to be free, yes? Page 67, they like ourselves were sick, right? So if I could look at them and do the prayer and ask God for kindness, patience, and tolerance and see them differently, because I need to see them differently as I needed to see myself differently, right? I had to see myself as somebody that wasn't well based on the conduct and the things that I was carrying, based on all the resentments, fear, and conduct I was carrying. How can I claim to be well? Even without alcoholism, if I was carrying all that stuff, would I be a sick individual? Yes, that's what they talk about on page 67. These other people who are not alcoholics, they just have the human component, right? Right? They talk. So, okay. So, again, here, when these crop up, here's the recipe. We ask God at once to remove them. Oh, no, wait a minute. Let's go over it. Let's discuss it. Let's really ponder it. Let's feed it. That's what we do. We're feeders, yes? Oh, here's a thought. I haven't had this for a while. Let's turn off the phone. Let's go sit down and let's really enjoy this emotional deformity that I create. Let's remember flaming the fire. And who does that? Anybody having a nice day, things are fine, and then you're invaded by a thought or an emotion? And you say, whoa, what's this? Let's have a closer look at it, right? And it changes everything around you. You make a conscious decision with, I've never seen this angle before. And you say, yeah, and what about this? And yeah. When you finish that one, we'll might as well look at this one too. Anybody? It kind of perpetuates, right? Now we're no good to nobody, right? We're irritable, restless, and discontent because the human condition is upon us again, right? So I need to interrupt this. So that's part of the leaven. So they're giving us a recipe here. Here's the overview. Where did we learn this and for? Yes? Okay. And why do we need to continue this? Because we're getting ready to look at some of the 8 and 9 stuff. Yes, we've looked at it. We're going to see how we're going to approach it. We ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends if we have harmed anyone. Holy shit. It seems like an overview of the whole process. Right? Yes? No? It sounds like they're giving us an overview here. I know a couple of you seem shocked right now. Take a second to absorb it. Like, bring it in. Breathe. It's okay. Talk yourself down off the ledge. Come back here. But my sponsor said, leave your sponsor out of this. Quit blaming them. You're here. Be responsible for yourselves for a second. Oh, we just lost 6 people. Okay, so... Thought I was losing my touch. Okay, so here we go. Then we resolutely, here's the word, turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. They've mentioned love and tolerance a couple times. If we've read 8 and 9, they talk about that's our hope. Love and tolerance is our code. They mentioned that on the page previous. They mentioned it here, and then they mention it in 11 again. I wonder if that's important. What's our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. We don't know how to do that too good because all our lives we've been fitting ourselves to be of maximum service to ourselves. Yes? Right? What's our most important? When people told us that we're the most important person in the room, how many people believe that? Finally, a room that understands. Finally. It's amazing what they'll tell us to keep us hooked in, eh? Okay. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even out, for by this time sanity will have returned. By what time? By the time I'm reading this? No, by the time I'm halfway through. Remember they talked about that? We'll be amazed before we're halfway through. Somewhere along the line, by continuously incorporating all this, growing understanding and effectiveness, somewhere along this line, this component that was present in step 1, that was determining our lives, right? This malady, somewhere along the line, this happens. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We'll seldom be interested in liquor, which was the whole purpose of this, yes? And if you can get this by getting to 84, would you do any rest of the book? If you can get paid for a full week, for a half a week, how many people would like that job? Right? So, yeah, that's the way we do things. Looks like I'm on a salary. No, you gotta work. I'm on a spiritual salary. That's right. Look, so people talk like, oh, by the time they talk about the step 10 promises, they talk about the 9-step. They are not the 9-step and 10-step promises. They're talked about in the 9th step and the 2nd step. That's like saying, oh, the 2nd step promise happens in the 2nd step about being restored to sanity. And the 3rd step about this relationship happens in step 3. No, it's an idea. It's a preparation as the result of. Right? I know some of you, how many people are kind of like, I'm open-minded to this, but still I'm going, anyway, we'll leave it. If tempted, we recoil from it as a hot flame. We react singly and normally. And we will find this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It comes. Notice it says it just didn't happen. It comes. Why? Because they're talking about 8 and 9, continuous way of life, growing in effectiveness and understanding. That one little paragraph, half a paragraph, talked about you continuously watching you, and the rest is about our relationship with something greater than ourselves. and the result of that relationship. So this is the miracle of it. We're not fighting. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. How do you know the problem has been removed? Because I'm able to stay, like in Bill's story. How do you know the problem has been removed in Bill's story? Because he couldn't stay sober. Then all of a sudden, the third time he was connected to something greater than himself, he had a recipe that he was incorporating. He was plagued with still self, yes? But what would save the day is he would go work with other people. That's how you know he was being restored to sanity. He was able to move past where he was never able to move past before. He was having a different experience based on his relationship with something greater than himself. All the other times he failed. But now he was connected. He had something else happening in his life. And as he looked back, he realized he was on a different footing, right? So they talked about here. That's how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. How do I do that? They haven't showed me. They showed me how to get spiritually connected. But how do I keep in fit spiritual condition? They haven't showed me the recipe of how to do that yet. Have they? They showed me how to get connected. Hello, operator? Yes, I hear a voice. I think I got hello. I think there's a connection. That's where we're at now. Hello. Is like listening, phone print on your ear. Right? I know there's something in there. Okay, anyways. It is easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels, our past events. I hear people all the time, I feel so good now that I did my fifth. Did you actually do a fifth or a confession? Because they can be confused sometimes. Sometimes when you do a confession, you feel really good about it, but it wasn't a fact-facing, fact-finding process where you see how self has defeated us and the common manifestations of self, how they were governing our lives without being able to see it, how we made decisions based on self that later placed us in a position to be hurt, that these emotions, ideas, and things that were guiding us, that they talked on page 54, the human experience, did not these feelings determine the outcome of the existence of our lives, I think it talks about, right? At a subconscious level, our decisions are still being made for us at a subconscious level. When we get the memo, it makes sense to us and we act on that. So if you're spiritually based, do you think you'd get a different memo than when you're instinct based? Right? Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. Intuitiveness, you got the quiet. You match calamity with serenity. Being able to find safe harbor within yourself. Have we learned that recipe? No, we learned how to remove this stuff, but we haven't learned how to develop it yet. Right? So it is, we're headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol is a stubble foot. We're not cured of alcoholism. We're not cured of it, but the problem's removed. Right? So long. And remember, I don't know when it was removed. If you understand the malady, that component, I don't know when it was removed. And you know what? I won't know when it comes back again. Right? I won't know when it comes back again, because if I knew when it came back again, then I'll do the steps then. How many people would do the steps then? If they knew, right? So that's why they give us those two different people, Jim and Fred, two different experiences, but they both drank again. One guy didn't have a care in the world. The other guy had all kinds of problems. Right? Why did they give us those examples? Because they both had the component of the malady still present. And it was undetected. Then the guy on page 43, where they went over and he's seen that what an alcoholic mind meant. And as long as he had an alcoholic mind, it's just a matter of time and place before he drank again. Here they're seeing, as the result of going through this and being diligent about my 8s and 9s and incorporating 11 and working with other people in 12, I will kind of survive me as I go through this process. And I'll have a different experience. So they talk about every day is a day we must carry the visions of God's will into all our activities. What's that? I'm still talking to myself 90% of the time at this stage of the game. I'm still negotiating with God. I'm still plagued with the idea of these resentments, fears, and conducts and harms. People are still not treating me very well. I'm looking at a lot of problems in my life when I finish my 6 and 7. Anybody, when you looked at your 8, how many people went, oh my God? I was feeling fine in my 4 and 5. Now I look at my 8, and it's kind of like, damn, how am I going to fix this stuff? How am I going to do that? I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to prison. Self just take over again. Let's put the brakes on this. Let's just go start working with people. Can I make coffee? So anyhow, every day is a day we must carry the vision of God into all our activity. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us continuously. I don't have the recipe on how to do that, because the only thought that goes with me consistently at this point in time is, how am I going to solve these problems? How am I going to get a job? Does she really like me? How am I getting her phone number? How am I going to get paid? How am I going to do this? The police still looking for me? Oh my God, where am I going to live? When am I going? Blah, blah, blah. But I'm more aware of the noise. Before it was just a riot. Now it's a subtle, it's a subtle house party that's happening up there, right? And I'm able to kind of find refuge after pain. I'm still motivated by pain at this stage of the game. Anybody? I get reminded to pray after I've experienced a lot of pain. Yes? Before it's, hey, God, help me out today. At night, thank you. All the rest of the day, I got it from here. You hear people say that all the time. I pray in the morning and give thanks at night. What do you do through the rest of the day? Cause mayhem. I add to my 8-step. There's shit to be done, and I got to get involved. Okay, anyways. Much has already been said. Much has already been said. Notice that you've already experienced all these things. You're just getting a kind of introduction to this thing. You're getting it's like, how many people remember when they went and got their license or practiced to get their license? Remember how nervous you were when you went to go get your license? Anybody? You're sitting there, and then you finally pass, you get your license. It's an introduction to the learning that's going to happen after that. You get all the basics you need to get your license. So now we have a spiritual license. We're connected. We have this license. It's the same kind of idea. I've never had to redo my license since I got it. I've had to renew it, but I've never had to redo it. Why? Because I keep certain principles and ideas and development. I'm a better driver today than when I first started. Isn't that the idea? Some people get worse, but we'll leave that for another meeting. We're not talking about them. Okay. So, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. From Him who has all knowledge and power. So what's my job is to find out what is this knowledge and power that I need to get access, is to grow in understanding and effectiveness, yes? So ready, here we go. If we have carefully followed directions, have we? Yes. Here's the caveat. I don't know if that's the right word, but here's the contract. Here's the well, let's read it. It says, if we've carefully followed directions, we've begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. To some extent, we've become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. Begun. Yes? But we must go further. So if doing step 10 would sustain me, then we'd be going right into 12, wouldn't we? If we had all the information we needed to develop and cultivate this relationship, to grow in understanding and effectiveness of the spiritual realm, and to do God's work and what they talk about here, thy will, not mine, be done, we can exercise, I missed one of the most important things, sir. Thy will not be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along these lines all we wish. It's the proper use of will. So you hear people say, I gave my will over. Nowhere does it say to give your will over. You'll always have your will. Because if you can give your will over, then you would never have a problem again, would you? It's like my kids. If my kids were able to give me their will in their lives, they would never experience any problems or any pain. But somewhere along the line it says, doesn't look like Dad's looking. Yeah, we're kind of like the same way. Like, as soon as we get out of the proximity of the house and whatever, it's like, let me go explore the human condition, right? And the voice starts talking, we start doing. Anybody? We've all had that experience, yes? If we would have just listened to those people, would our lives look different? So we see we don't have the capability of always coming to the right thought or the right action and seeing the outcome of things. Because on this side of it, it all makes sense. What does that mean? Everybody on my 8th step made sense at the time that I did those things. After, it didn't make sense based on the consequences and the outcome of it. But every one of those things on my 4 made sense at the time it was happening. Anybody? So, here we go. We've begun to develop this vital 6th sense, but we must go further. That means more action. When was the last time they talked about that? It was 8 and 9, right? And then this thought brings us to step 10. You notice it didn't say anywhere here, now we need more action in step 10? It doesn't say that anywhere, does it? It says this thought. What thought? The inventory. The promises that happen as the result of incorporating all these principles. This is what we could expect. If we're having problems with these things that crop up as we're cleaning up the past, we do the recipe we learned in 4 and 5. Yes, and that we're going to learn in 8 and 9. Yes. What's our next function? Is to develop or cultivate this relationship. And if we've done that and done all these things, we could expect to have these things. This is how we do it. So step 11 talks about prayer meditation. We're going to get that in a couple weeks. But here, when we retire at night, the next page, upon awakening, as we go through the day, right? When agitated or doubtful, we pause. So, look at this. Step 11 is the only step in the whole book from page 86 to 88, well, include 89, right? It's a part of it. 89 that talks about what we need to incorporate in a daily basis. We're bringing everything together to cultivate and to develop. So there's only one purpose for the instructions here is how can I stay connected and how can I be of service. And those two elements will give me a life beyond anything I could ever imagine. You talk to most people who work with people, what's the basis of their being amazed, not somewhat being amazed with their life, is the basis of a relationship with a power greater than themselves and the service of others. So, somewhere along the line, sobriety is no longer my number one priority or focus. Right? Because I realized that's not the goal. It was when I started, but the goal is my relationship. My relationship with something else gives me the ability to experience all the things I've ever hoped for. And it gives me a daily reprieve. So when my life goes sideways, it's not about me working on me, it's acknowledging, God, I've left the room of the presence of the power or God, the universe, whatever you call it. I've stepped into the instinct-based experience instead of the key way, which is the spiritual base. So I can respond to any way as I go through the day. I could take an instinct-based reaction to this thing, right, which is step 7, falling short of the mark. Or if it's step 6, stuff still determining my past, right? Or I could pray and ask for direction and take a spiritual approach, right? I'm the deciding vote. How many people has gone absent of prayer and just decided to do it their way? Nobody in this fine group. I know y'all got it off. I've had to apologize for a lot of my thinking. And when my thinking takes over, I can't stop it. When I become aware of it somewhere in midstream, I got to pause and bring God into it. Now I could choose to continue to punish my wife or the people around me when I acknowledge ego, pride, and all that other stuff. I don't want to go be, I nearly said humiliated, but it's not. Show humility by saying I'm wrong, but I still want to be mad at this person for a while. That's a defect. That there has to be a period of penance. Nobody like that here. Anybody have people pay their penance? And when you think they've paid, then I've talked about that in 6 and 7. That's one of my character flaws, is penance, right? Making you pay penance instead of giving you the same grace that was given to me. So they talk about here, 88, and we're going to go back. Holy shit, this flew here. It says, we alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in a simple way we've just outlined. What did they just outline? Step 11. That's the disciplines that I need to incorporate to be connected to something greater than myself. Upon awakening, as I go through the day, many times each day, checking in with this power. And sometimes it's as simple as saying thank you. Thank you. Right? When you say thank you, you're back in the moment of realizing there's something greater governing your life. So as we go back here, and we look at this list. So what was recommended to me, and the book does and doesn't say it, but it talks about here on page 76, right? There's probably some misgivings as we look over. Oh, we're looking over still? We're not doing nothing? At the bottom of 76, right? As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel different about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us reassure you, some people need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual going, so we might prejudice. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not the end in itself. Underline this. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. So, here people think the 8 and 9 step is really not about you. It is and it isn't. It's more about how I can be of service to God and the people around me. And if I'm being of service to God and the people around me, the people I'm approaching, I'm being a demonstration of this thing, right? So, where do we get this demonstration idea? You made that contract, you made that alignment when you said here on page 63, right? So it comes full circle, right? You did the 3rd step prayer without realizing it. You made this commitment in your asking or your prayer or your commitment, or we thought well before taking the step, making sure we're ready. And this is it. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. I'm bearing witness to this new thing that's happened to me compared to how I used to be. And when people see me, it will be 90% of the time will be the same effect Bill had with Ebby. This is not the same person. So like when I stood in front of a judge, so we used to have this saying, when you stand in front of a judge, all they got is your file. Right? And they're reading everything and the crown's going over. You could either confirm what they're reading or make them question what they're reading. Right now, when we go to make amends, we're in a position of making them question, who is this person in front of me? This doesn't seem like the same person I was here a while ago. So what I did, and we'll get into more of some of these details next week, but that's the basis that I need to incorporate to start this. Why do I need to have step 11 and working with other people in my life? Well, here I'm making a list of all these people. So what I did emotional on one side and financial on the other. And some made both lists. So I had emotional and financial. Right? And I put these, and then I had some law. Like the things that were really, so there's really still 2 categories, but I had them broken into 3 things. So then on the financial, I wrote down the sum of each one of them. Now, some I didn't know the sum of because some of the mischief and some of the harms on my list was I used to like run on top of cars when I was a juvenile delinquent and stuff. I'd damage people's property or I'd cause emotional mayhem to people. Just my presence would change the element of a room. I've bit entertainers. I've done like they used to call them strippers, but now you got to call them I've done horrific things while drinking. Right? At the time, I didn't realize until I did this list of, oh my God, look what I did. I ripped off these people. I ripped off that people. I was dishonest about this. So I made a list of all these people. Now, you hear some people say, make a list of now, maybe, and never, right? You hear people say that. My sponsor said, now you have this list, now you're going to pray which ones you're going to start. Why am I praying? Because if God's orchestrating my life, he's the director, we're his agents. If he's the father, I'm the principal, then God already has some scenarios lined up where I'm going to be a service, I'm going to be one of his agents. And so what does that kind of look? So the biggest one on my list, as an example, there was a whole bunch that little, but the biggest one was going to go turn myself in Toronto. I was looking at penitentiary time, and I didn't want to do it. So I had to talk to my sponsor. I had to pray, and people said, don't go in like John Wayne. Ask for direction. Prepare. So I worked a bit, got some money to pay for some stuff. I went to Toronto. I went to my sister's and asked God for direction. The day I went to Toronto, if I would have went a day earlier or a day later, I would have missed this guy. This guy was leaving my sister's place. He had the name of a lawyer. It just happened. I've never seen him sitting there. He says, oh, I see. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to turn myself. He says, here's my lawyer. He's really good. He talked about all the stuff, so I got a lawyer. I phoned a lawyer before I turned myself in, right? I turned myself in, and the lawyer was taking care of things. And now I'm praying about things, not for things. I'm not negotiating with God. I said, God, you have me here. This is what a person told me where I had fear, and it shifted. So when I talked about it in a meeting with a couple of my friends, this lady walks up to me and she goes, why you're fearful is, and I looked at her kind of weird. She just walked up to me and said, why you're fearful is because you think you're standing in front of a power greater than the power you serve. She says, remember, you will never stand in front of any power greater than the power you serve. And if you keep that in mind, that God still is the age of miracles, then you don't have nothing to worry about. So I went in, and so when I went in to turn myself in, he was trying to get me bail. They gave me bail on like 4 or 5 charges, but they didn't give me bail on one. So that means they'd have to still hold me. And I'm going back and forth. I'm in detention. And when I'm in detention, it was in the dawn. So there was a red line in the middle of the room. On the one side was all the people of color, and on the other side was all the white people. I sat right in the middle table. I said, give me the strength to sit here. What do you want me to do? And what I did while I was in there was 12-step people. I find myself being like standing by the gate, or this person would walk up and say, I've never been asked this before. People see there's something different about you. People walk up to me. This guy walks up to me. He's got all track marks. He's in bad shape. He goes, what are you doing in here? I said, what do you mean, what I'm doing in it? He says, you're like a bright light bulb in this place. He says, what are you doing in here? And I was able to tell him my story and what I was doing, right? And I don't know what impact it had, but it had the impact that maybe there's a different life for him when he left there. He witnessed somebody that used to be just like him that is now serving and being different, on a different footing, right? And so when I went and I prayed to things, so they finally gave me bail, through the John Howard Society, and based on the history and what was going on, the gang squad gave testimony why they want to why they didn't want me on the street. The John Howard Society signed my waiver, but I had to sign once a week, and I had the phone every day. So I'll give you a rough idea of what was going on. And I couldn't leave the province. I lived in BC, and I was in Toronto. And I had to get home to my support, like I was still. And so I was asking God, I said, God, I need some help. I don't got no money. I don't got no thing. Like, I need some help. And so this intuitiveness in my 11, Neville said, go to a meeting. Just go to a meeting. So I was looking in the directory, and there was a speaker meeting, and then there was a meeting that I'd like to go to where all the young people go, and you know, the dating. Let's you know what I mean? The potential of dating, right? You go and meet other people and all that stuff. So there's a discussion meeting over here, speaker meeting over there. I said, I want to go over to the discussion meeting. That's where my town. Inside said, no, go to the other meeting. I said, I don't want to go to the other meeting. This is what I said. I don't want to go to the other. The thing said, go. This voice said, no, go to the other meeting, the speaker meeting. I said, I don't want to go to this. I'm talking to myself like this. This intuition says, go to the speaker meeting. I don't want to go to a speaker meeting. Anybody have those conversations? I want to do what I want. God's trying to talk to me. I'm not listening because I want to know the whole plan before. He says, no, you show up where I need you to show up and you'll find out why when you get there. I just need you to go there. Right? It's not a negotiation. Just do what you're told, but I don't know how to do what I'm told. So I'm negotiating with God. So I go, I remember it too. I said, fine, okay, I'll go. Right inside of myself. I'm alone. It must have looked like a nut bar, but I'm having like, now it's an external conversation with God. Fine, I'll go. So I'm sitting in the back of this meeting and I'm pouting a bit. I'm sitting there. And this guy gets up and he shares. And he's a contractor. Right? And I said, afterwards, I said, I need a bit of help. I need to get, fare to get home, all that other stuff. I need a job. He goes, you got any tools? I said, no. He goes, you got work boots? I go, no. I said, all I got is really the clothes on my back and a change of clothes. That's all I really got. I was still new. He says, and they took my number. That night he must have prayed about. He called me that night. Right? And I started work the next day. So I'm working the next day. I'm going to John Howard Society. I'm doing all this stuff. And the person from the John Howard Society, I said, look, I need to get home. Trial's not for a while. I need to get home. They said, Tony, based on what you've demonstrated and based on our meetings, he says, it's okay if you go back home and phone us once a month. He says, you okay with that? I said, I'm okay with that. Now, that's something greater than I could ever understand working in my life before I was able to acknowledge it and see it. There was something really at work there. But my willingness to approach this in that way, even though I couldn't see, feel, and touch what was happening, I was trusting something greater than me to do for me in my best interest, even though it didn't look like my best interest. Even when I was sitting in jail, I was 12-stepping people, going back and forth from the whole shackles and the whole shot. I'm using that. I said, God, help me be of service here. If this is your will for me, give me the strength to be of service. Right, so it's pretty wild. Anyways, that's next week we'll get into more of application of this stuff. I don't know why I went where I went, but we went there. I feel good about it. Live long and prosperous. May the force be with you. We have the 7th edition. There's stuff in the chat. We have a discussion afterwards for those who want to follow up on stuff. And we'll close with the serenity prayer for those that wish. What's the basis for a great life? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Live long and prosperous. May the force be with you. Read on. You can unmute. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Welcome, everybody, to Keystone Thursday Night Big Book Study Workshop with the program of recovery laid out by the first 100-minute woman. In our basic text in the first portion, sobriety date's April 8, 1989. Like a lot of you know, it wasn't my first introduction to AA, but it was my first introduction to the program of recovery as outlined in here and the application of that, and I've been sober ever since. So I struggled for 11 years in and out of the fellowship doing catchphrase sobriety, and 12 and 12 and other methods that didn't seem to work too well for a type of alcoholic like myself, but I didn't know what type of alcoholic I was until I went through this. When I found out what type of alcoholic I was according to the kind of information laid out in our basic text, by the time I got to page 44, I knew why I kept on relapsing. And it became clear and evident that unless I got this thing, I was going to die an alcoholic death. That the guarantee that was promised to me in step 1 is that I was going to continue to relapse. That I was of the type that was without defense against the first drink. And, I was the type that they talk about on page 23 where I suffer from this malady that centers in the mind. They call it a phenomenon, right? I didn't suffer from, like, the obsession they talk about on page 30 is the pre-step 1 condition. Is the idea that somehow, someday I could control and enjoy my drinking. If a person has that thought, they've yet to do step 1, right? So when I finally got to that place, long before realizing it, I knew I could never safely drink, but I could never stop myself from doing that. I would forget that while picking up a drink. What am I not supposed to be doing? Remember that we deal with alcohol. So a part of the process when they introduced me to step 2, it was the idea that I needed to undergo this change that they explained in the back of the book, the spiritual appendix. Right? And when they explained it in such a way, it made sense that I would continue to have an alcoholic mind unless I had this experience, right? And once I had this experience, they talked about entering this thing called a daily reprieve, right? Where the problem that was present in my life in step 1 would be removed, where it no longer exists for me. And then what I'd be left with is the human condition that I apply spiritual principles to that gives me relief from life and the world around me. Right? So the insanity of the first drink hasn't returned. And I won't know when it returns. That's the scary part about this. Because if I knew when it returned, right, then I'd just apply the steps then. I'm that type of person. I just do what's minimal, right? Like, if I could have took my time doing the steps, I would have took my time doing the steps. But I was on a life and death errand. What made me say that? Well, 11 years. My last relapse, I did 360 meetings in 90 days, and I went to you guys heard this before, and I went to the noon meeting on a Saturday. I collect my 3-month chip after 11 years in and out, gave the best self-talk you ever wanted to hear. I threw out around a whole bunch of catchphrases and bumper stickers, and I had the right ideas and all the right sayings, and I was surrendering this, and page 417 that. Well, back then it was 449. That's how long ago it was. But I had I call it an evangelical change within my mind that I created. Right? This euphoria that I created through a belief system that wasn't based on anything. And the reality of my situation was I ended up relapsing again. So then through this experience, I had an experience. And that's where we're kind of at tonight. We're kind of talking about the importance of the recipe here. A lot of people talk about the mechanics of the book like they're all separate, right? Like they're all individually practiced, right? And it's kind of like, it's like driving your car. You may learn certain phases of what it looks like to drive your car, like the brakes, the clutch, if you're doing that system, or standard or automatic, what drive, reverse, all those break it down into categories. But when you actually go through the application, you got to put all these things together, right? Unless you put all these things together, sorry, the wife's just getting home and the dog. So unless you put all these things together, you're not going to be very successful driving your car, are you? If you're just practicing, you need to put all the elements together in order to successfully and safely drive your car within the means of. So anyways, where we're going at tonight. So last week we kind of looked at the idea of on page 76, it talked about this idea that we're ready to move on, right? When ready, we said something like this: my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me. We talked about what that is the mindset of the confirmation of step 3. We're moving into 8 and 9, and then when we got to 76, it says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. A lot of people think it says, let's rush out and do steps 8 and 9. It says, let's look at. This whole thing is a preparation before we take any action. Steps 1, 2, and 3 is preparation before we take the action in 4. Why we take the action in 4? Because we know what we're trying to achieve by the previous outline of the information that we got. So when we finished 4, we got into 5, and then we begin to have a spiritual experience. We begin to have this connection that they talked about. When they finished the 4th step, they hoped on page 71, they hoped that we were convinced, right, as they were convinced that God could remove whatever self-will has blocked you out from it. It's very important to understand this recipe that we engaged in the 4th step that's outlined in the big book, because the 4th step's the foundation for step 11. Right? They talk about that. And we kind of went through the overview last week of step 10 as a transition step. It's an overview of the whole package, right, and purpose and where we're going from here. Our next function is to grow an understanding and effectiveness. That's the first real instruction, right? Is continue. Continue means you're already doing something, right? Because when this was put together, they weren't waiting 6 months or a year in between steps. These were done pretty rapidly in succession. That means when you finish your 5, you're looking at 6 and 7, you're reading through 8 and 9, and that night when we retired, we reviewed our day. Right? And then upon awakening, we kind of go through the recipe here on this connection, getting connected. And as we go through the day, we pause and edge. So we got this recipe. And then on page 89, they talk about what would ensure immunity from drinking is intensive work with another alcoholic. So we see this package they put together, and why that is really the development in 8 and 9. So we're going to go there anyways. Page 88. It talked about last week here at the end, last paragraph, we alcoholics are undisciplined. So we let God discipline us in a simple way we have just outlined. Just. Wording is very important. It didn't say as we have been outlining, as we just outlined, right? It's like when they went into page 85, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, direction. Much has already been said. It's an overview of all the previous information, right? Much has already been said. You see, it kind of covers the whole conversation up to page 85. 88, it says, right, the way we have just outlined. What did we just outline is the information on how to successfully do the overview on page 84, 85. Does that kind of make sense? It shows us how to constantly develop this thing, where it talks about is easy on page 85. It is easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels, our accomplishments. We're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a stubble full. We're not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. How can I best serve thee, not mine? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts that must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along these lines all we wish. It's the proper use of will. Right? So you hear people saying, I give my will and life over to the care of God. God's saying, no, you need to be involved in this. I give you free will. It's the proper use of will. Every day you get to decide, where am I, am I going to ask for power to direct this bus, or am I going to try pushing it? Who's running the show here? Is it me or is it God? Who am I asking for direction here? Is it me or is it God? How many people has woken up and realized, gone halfway through the day and realized you haven't even prayed yet? Just get busy, go. How many people spend more time during the day talking to themselves than they do seeking counsel with something greater than themselves? How many people, when they talk to God, it's about negotiating? Let's negotiate. Well, God, here's a list of things I got for you to carry out, and I'm wondering what's taking you so long. Anybody ever try to negotiate with God here? Bargain? Any bargainers here? Or is it just me? God, if you do this or do that, hey, God, can you take care of this problem over there? Can you take care of that person over there? Like, we're still the director without even realizing it. We're not praying for direction. We're giving God direction. Big difference. It's subtle, right? So anyway, I don't know why I went there. So it's a proper use of will. We covered this last week. So step 11 is the only step in the book and anywhere in our literature that has an outline for a 24-hour period. Right? So everything we've done has brought us to this pivoting point, right? Of moving in a new direction, and us being the navigator of the continuing and following. So now we have a compass, we have a map, and we're the deciding vote, whether we go true north or we're heading south, right? What are we doing here? Like, what am I going to follow? So I got the map, right? It's outlined in here. The compass is that intuitiveness, and true north is the direction through prayer and counsel, right? So I'm seeking counsel. What am I trying to do here? On page 87, what used to be a hunch, everybody there, what used to be a hunch or the occasional inspirational gradually becomes a working part of the mind. What gradually becomes a working part of the mind? Everything we've learned up to this period. And what have we learned of the shifting of the being able to sidestep self is in the fourth step. The recipe in the fourth step becomes a working part of the mind. That's why it says continue. What did we learn in the fourth step? How to master resentment, yes. How to outgrow fear. How to seek counsel with something greater than me to create a shift within inside of me. How to align my conduct where it doesn't cause me or other people pain, harm, guilt, shame, and remorse, right? Because if my conduct continues to hurt others, we're sure to drink. They talk about this. Now, how can I find peace in the midst of my life where I'm not engaged in things that cause me guilt, shame, harm, or remorse? Anybody like a life like that? How many people like the life that they're engaged in stuff that causes them guilt, shame, remorse, and regret? Anybody like those feelings? Waking up with those feelings of regret, remorse, and self-doubt, and shame, and pity? Ain't nobody likes that stuff, do they? Right? So what we get talking about here, how can I be free of those things? So the recipe here is on page 88. We alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in a simple way we have just outlined. But that's not all. There's more action. There is action and more action. You notice they mention that twice. One is the practicing of these principles, and the other is developing. And step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to practice these principles in all our affairs, right? Carry this message and practice these principles in all our affairs. So there's two applications. Here on the next page, you'll see where I'm going with this, right? It talks about practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when all other activities fail. That means when I'm praying, when I'm self-talk, when I'm going to meetings, when I'm trying to be my own solution. That, you know what I mean? Anybody ever try self-help books? Anybody ever try to be their own solution here? And it doesn't seem to be working? Anybody? So what happens here is that we're going to get into that, actually, is very important. So, going back to where we left off last week. So, we have this recipe. We're engaged in somewhat of a relationship with something greater. It's just starting to click in here. We have our step 8. We're looking at it, right? We're asking for direction here. We have all this stuff before we engage in it or get active on it. We have a couple things that we get to utilize, right? So when you look back on page 77, give you a second to remind us there. We kind of, we're going to back up again. Sorry, 76. Here we go. So we covered this, but it's worth covering again. It says, now we need more action, right? Without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. To look at something means no touchy, right? Look at it, no touch. Okay? We have a list of all persons we had harmed and to whom we're willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out. Oh, wait a minute. Now it says now we go out. After the preparation's done, now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the breeze which have accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will. See the difference there? You always have your will. You're never able to get rid of it. But the difference is it directed along God's lines or your lines? How am I going to conduct myself today? Am I going to seek counsel or am I going to take it from here? So we see, I'm convinced that my life got to where it was not only under alcoholism, but under the loss of alcoholism, but through my decision process. And the things that made sense, the things that I pursued, the pursuit of happiness that caused me regret, pain, and anguish. The pursuit of money, property, prestige, anyway, we have that. I have my fourth step. So my fourth step is really saying this is what my life looks like absent of God. Yes? And the only indication that what it looks like with the presence of something greater than me is the people around me and the people I'm engaged with or following or who are directing me and the people who put the book together. That's the only real indication. And now I'm starting maybe to have my own experience here, right? So it reminds us, it says, remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. So we're not there yet, right? It says, remember, you've agreed to it. And the next page, it talked about our real purpose is to fit. You want to underline that word, fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. So what it's saying is step 9 isn't really about you anymore. We're going to prepare the damage we have done with people, places, and things. We're going to go make right. We're going to allow these people, places, things the opportunity for the same healing, hopefully, that we're experiencing. And hopefully we could be an example of something greater than this as we go forward. But I need to have the ability to set my mind and spirit right before I go into a lot of these situations. Because how I used to look at these situations and how I now see them is two different ways. Right? But when I'm not spiritually fit, I see things the way I used to. Anybody? Right? So it takes a bit of prayer, it takes a bit of maybe talking to my sponsor again to get a proper perspective on how things actually were, not how I remember them. Remember, I was the only one drunk in most of those situations. I remember, I don't know if any drunk people here has ever argued with sober people about what happened. Tony, you were in the cop car, not us. Sure, you had to bring that. I remember, I don't know how many times I'd be in the back of the cop car. Woohoo! Hands behind my back. Right? I'll see you shortly. No, you won't. See you later. Anyhow, moving on. So they talk about here. The first one they talk about is it's interesting. It's your job to go through. We'll hit some highlights. Because as you have your 8, you have all different situations in there. Here they're talking in past tense of some of the challenges they had, right, that we may have. And so they're giving some of their experience, strength, and hope. That doesn't mean this is the list that we go through. They just need to start somewhere. So how we prepare our list on what we're going to engage in is in step 11. I'm praying for direction. Okay, God, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And that intuitiveness will come. Well, you need to phone this person, or you need to take care of this, or you need to do that, and then the negotiations start. Well, I don't want to start with that one, but that's the one you're thinking about. That's the one you need to start with. So we need to prepare ourselves spiritually. So here's the first one, which I found interesting, is a person we don't like. How many people would want to start off with somebody they don't like to make amends? It's not on my list. I want to start with the easy ones. Here they're going with somebody I hate, right? That may cause me more damage than I cause them. Damn, I better be able to set my mind straight before I go see them. Anybody? Because how many people want to make amends for an amend? Right? And before I had this process, I like 11 years in and out, me being the keener going out making these amends before I was even ready to make these amends, would have to make amends for the amends, right? Like nothing worse than grabbing somebody by a throat and halfway through the amend and telling them they don't understand what you're trying to do here, right? And asking them again if they like to get together. No, I'm good. Still trying to get over the last time I seen you, the way you made amends, right? So, very important. So why is it important? Anybody have somebody they dislike? Nobody. Or cause them problems, or just see, before you did your 4, you would spend a lot of time in the crackerjack area of your mind, right? Pop and chip area, I call it. Where you go sit down and spend a bit of time reviewing and going over how you punish them again, or and review, replay anybody over. So now I gotta go make. So there's this guy. Oh my God, we'll go with the guy in a. I won't say who. he would get in fights with guys, and he'd enter a room and he'd take up all my energy. I'd forget there's anybody else in the room when he walked in. And I remember going to my sponsor, I said, this guy needs to be taught a lesson. I think I should teach him the lesson. And I said, maybe it's God's will for him that I teach him. So I'm going to meet him in a parking lot. He thinks he's a tough guy, because he hit one of my sponsors. My sponsor says, you can't do that. Says you got to pray for him, you got to set right. So I started gossiping about him. My sponsor got wind of that. My sponsor says, did you make amends for all that stuff you were saying? I said, no. He says, no, you got to go make amends to the guy for trash talking. I'm not going to go make amends to him. I said, I want to meet him in the parking lot. My sponsor says, no, you got to go do it, right? If you want to stay sober and longevity. So I had to get my mindset through the inventory process that what I was doing wasn't right because of my self-esteem, my security, my ambitions, all these instincts, fear, right, and self-seeking were driving me, and was interfering not only with my standing in the meetings in the queue, but my mental health and my emotional well-being that I was creating within inside of myself, right? And so now I got to go make amends to that. If I'm thinking like that, it's not going to be successful. So I need to be working in 11, right? Preparing myself, being able to pause, redirect, and go make the amend, and without engaging, and then remove myself from that amend and don't do it no more. That's why, if everybody ever in AA ever apologized for gossiping, guess what? They would stop gossiping. Why? Because we hate to apologize. There's nothing more than we hate to do than apologize. I mean, a lot of us rather work a 14-hour day with 10-hour pay than to apologize. We hate it. It's not in our strong suit, especially when we're so that's where step 11 would come in as I go through there in sponsorship, is to be able to pause. Right, not allow the pressure cooker to continue. That energy inside, right? And once it gets to a certain point, it has to go somewhere, right? And then you're getting engaged in conflict with the other person. Why are you engaged with conflict with the other person? Because you're in conflict yourself. But if you're able to stay peace by praying, right? Talking to something greater than you, they don't have to know that you're pausing and praying and asking God for direction. And asking God, my prayers when I was new was, God, save me from myself and save others from me. Right? That was a huge prayer. And so as we go along, they talk about, here on the next page, page 78, most alcoholics owe money. Well, that's a difference, because when I was getting paid, my sponsor said, well, how are your financial amends coming? I said, well, I'm getting to them later. He says, oh, I see you're buying new stuff. He says, you're buying stuff with other people's money. I said, no, I'm buying it with my money. I said, how? He said, how? Did you pay them back for the money you owe them? I said, no. He says, then you're using their money to buy your stuff. Sometimes I didn't like my sponsor too much, because it's simple. Because in my mind, it was, I worked hard all week. I deserve them. I'll pay them later. Right? Because I don't want to give them my money. No, you're not giving them your money, you're giving them back their money, right? And some of it, like, I didn't know how I was going to pay it back. Well, that's where prayer and trust comes in, right? Like, there will be a way shown to you, right? And sometimes you make a deal. So when I did my money one, I put a list of all the people, places, and things, and I put a list beside how much it was, and the ones that financially affected people, say like child support. I know it affected the mother and the child, so I made arrangements to pay that first before I went and paid other people, right? Financial institutions, I phoned them and said, hey, I'd like to make an arrangement, a payment arrangement, take care of this, and this, right? Or sometimes a debt consolidator, whatever the situation may be. But sometimes we want to do it John Wayne style. I want to get all the money and go rocking in there like a big shot, right? And here you go, right? Well, it's about still practicing humility, right? And letting people know. Like, I got people in the fellowship that owe me money, and I don't think that if we're hiding from people, hiding from our creditors, that we ever find peace. So that's why I think it's kind of important that they kind of put it here. Oh, the next one's good. perhaps we've committed a criminal offense. I don't know how long I stayed a prisoner for some of the things that I did, or some of the warrants when I was new. Every time I seen a cop, every time I seen a cruiser, every time, like I was a guard and a prisoner within my own cell that I created within my own mind. So I covered that last week, how I got a lawyer together and I went and turned myself in and I trusted God. And while I was in there, right, what was I doing? There was no meeting. There was no one to talk to. There was nothing available to me. I started working with other people. I started 12-stepping people while I was in there, asking God for the strength to do the right thing. Not praying for God to do what I think he should do, but praying for knowledge of his will for me and the power to care that I started 12-stepping people. It's pretty amazing stuff here, right? So, now this is the interesting. On 79, they talk about if the things I'm going to do are going to impact other people, then I need to consult those people. And the first thing I need to do is pray. Like, I can't go save myself at the expense of other people. I need to do it like an impact statement. What's going to happen here if I do this, right? You know, like if I give all my money over here, then I got no money for rent. I'm causing more problems over here. If I'm not paying child support over there, then my child suffers, and this person over here. Like, so it's interesting here. Or if I go turn myself in, who's going to take care of my responsibilities? Is everything in check? Does everybody know what I'm going to go do here, right? So there's no surprises. Am I going to go just walk up to the boss and tell him what I've been saying about him for the last 2 years? No, you're going to keep your mouth shut and go consult with another human being, right? And that's why it talks about we share our experience, strength, and hope. The most critical thing you could ask somebody when seeking counsel within our fellowship or with anybody is, did you have experience with this? Right? And what was the outcome? What did you do? How did you get through it? Because a part of this is these things that we're engaged in is seeing how God shows up. Right? Because my experience as I went through this is I got to see some remarkable things happening in my life that I couldn't give an account for, but it tuned me into the spiritual realm that there was something at work in my life even though I didn't realize it. And that's why it talks about our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Right? How do I grow an understanding of effectiveness is applying the prayer and meditation and the engagement of working with others as I go clean up my past. So I'm continuing all these things that I learned to stay engaged with something greater than me. And when I get pain-based or fear-based is because there's more me involved than there is God. I don't know how else to say it, but I had to see the difference between those two. I had to see the benefit where some people say they just pray in the morning and give thanks at night. I'm not of that type. I need to have in constant, reminding myself many times each day, right? Thy will, not mine, be done. Why do I have to do that? Because my mind will take over. My mind will hold me hostage to the bondage, and I don't know it's doing that because I'm used to the noise. But I'm not, now I'm having a different experience. It becomes uncomfortable to be in those situations I used to be comfortable in. Does that kind of make sense then? Does that kind of make, yeah. So I know now when I'm a little on a spiritual basis, and I know when I'm not. And I know when I'm avoiding spiritual principles, and I know when I'm not. Right? Because a lot of us will try to avoid things. So a lot of us are still trying to save our ass instead of our face. And you can't save both. Right? One of them's got to go, right? So the part of the fifth step was learning humility, right? This ongoing humility thing. So they talk about here on page 79, reminding ourselves that we have decided to go at any lengths to find a spiritual experience. Isn't that, see how they changed the wording? Over here, it says, right, remember as agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Which means the exact same thing, right over here, right, is that we said we would go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. What are we looking? We begin to have one in 5, but we haven't had one to the state which removed the problem, right? And I don't know when the problem's removed, but it gives me an indication by the time we're halfway through, right? And in step 10, it says, by this time, sanity will have returned. If you follow the bouncing ball, right, the first indication of this problem being removed is halfway through 9, right? And that means I'm engaged in, well, for sake of whatever, 10, 11, and 12, which you're really engaged in 12, which covers everything, right? But we'll say I'm practicing the disciplines of 11 and looking to be at service in 12. So where does that couple months of indication comes where this thing usually takes place in a few months, usually seldom takes years of self-discipline to bring about, is a spiritual appendix. It talks about what usually takes place in a few months. So there's the educational variety, which we're engaged in, and the sudden. Even if you have the sudden, you still need to find how to cultivate and develop it. So either way, they rope you into this thing. Either way, I need to find this mechanics where it becomes a working part of the mind. How do I know it's a working part of the mind? Is somewhere along the line is how many times during the day does my mind tell me to pause, pray, call somebody, or redirect? How much during the day am I engaged in counsel with myself? There's the indication. So when I review my night is how much self was involved today. Was I thinking of myself most of the time? That's why people don't like a step 11. They're like 10. I'm thinking about myself all the time. Continue to watch where I can do that. I can focus on me all day. Finally, a step I can really enjoy. Right? Step 11 says it's about everybody but you. Damn, I don't like this book. I don't like this at all. So, as we go through this, it's interesting. They talk about before taking 80, and then they talk about 81, 82, all different stuffs here. And they talk about relationships, all this stuff, and it's interesting, all the different things they go through. But what's really interesting is how they kind of finish the overview here, right? In other words, like they talk about relationships, not giving advice to people if you haven't had that experience, right? It's mind your own business. Don't get involved in other people's relationships. Mind your own business. When I sponsor somebody, I don't get involved in I don't get in between what's going on there. I ask the person I'm sponsoring, are they practicing spiritual principles, right? Oh, they're wrong. Well, why are they wrong? How did you get yourself into this situation? What are you doing to turn it around? Why? Because we still have a warped sense of seeing things as we like to see them sometimes. I know some of you may find that surprising, but that's why it says continue to watch for where you take over, because when you take over, it becomes about them and us again, right? But if you're connected, it becomes about me and my relationship with God. There's an indication. When your focus becomes more on the people, places, and things around you, that's an indication that you're back in charge of trying to arrange the lights and the ballots. But if you're in counsel with something else and pausing and seeing how you can be of service and being where your feet are, right, that's an indication that you're connected to something greater than you. So I always get people to do the review is, how much time did you spend in counsel with something greater than you? And how much time did you spend in counsel with you today? Oh boy. How many times did you actually pause and get connected? Right? So it's interesting. So here, let's look at the summary. I love this. Page 82. The alcoholic is like a tornado, roaring his way through the lives of others. Roaring his way through the lives of... You ever see like a lion roaring? It gets everybody's attention, yes? But the lion's unaware of its own sound because it's used to it. But everybody around is kind of like, damn! Right? If you're walking along and walk by, turn the corner and a lion was there roaring, would it get your attention? And he's like, just everyday stuff for him. So that's what they're saying. That's just another day in my life. How's it affecting you? The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Dead. Right? Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking, or a woman, a person, is unthinking when they say that sobriety is enough. My number one focus is sobriety. Well, then you're missing the whole picture here. He is like the farmer who comes up out of the cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. His wife remarks, "Don't see anything the matter here. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" That means we've gone to a couple meetings. Ain't it grand that I stopped drinking? Where's my parade? Why is everybody still talking about the past stuff? Why is people still trying to hold me accountable? Why is people still have anxiety when I show up? Why is everybody so skeptical? Because of the shit that you've caused and your inability to see it. Oh boy. Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. I remember when I sought counsel, like I asked God, I said, God, give me direction in what I read and what I'm engaged in, and what books that you want me to pursue, put people, places in my life that will enhance me in the road that you want me to go on. And somewhere, I just opened a book one day and it talked about what it talked about here, because the book is it's a reoccurring theme all the time, right? And it's so subtle how they talk about it. It says, yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. And in the family afterwards, I think it talks about it'll take years to tear down the old structure to build new ones in its place. So that the years in the old structure, I think, really talks about the warped thinking and step 6 stuff, right? And the rationalization and justification of things we're unable to quite see at a level that we're ready for, but we're moving forward. That's why they talk about spiritual progress, right? And it takes time to see what everybody else sees, but usually takes pain to get us there, yes? Let's be honest. Anybody here, if you never experienced any kind of pain caused by you, would you pursue spiritual help? No. So we keep showing up and we keep needing help, right? That's what it's kind of saying. Yes. There's a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. Who must? We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we're sorry won't fit the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it. Not how we used to see it, how we now see it. Damn! Right? And we don't Shanghai them. We ask for it to make an appointment or to sit down and say, hey, you know what? Can we have a family meeting this Sunday? Anybody we get to that we have an amend with, we don't Shanghai them or blindside them. We kind of ask for permission and say what we're about. Look, I'd like to talk to you. I'm in recovery, or you know, I'm trying to get some things in order. And there was some wrongs that I'd like to talk to you about. If you have a moment, you know, I'm on a new path. You tell them what you're about to do and why you want to see them. And you ask for permission to do so. And then you really know what to engage in, not to engage in. I don't think it's a good idea if you had an affair with a married woman to phone the husband and ask him permission to talk to the wife. I don't think you don't do that, right? And you don't go tell on the person. You really got to watch. Some people do some really stupid shit in AA, right? Somebody will go tell somebody else. You gotta let God work through this stuff, right? And you gotta just be willing to move in that direction. So it talked about here, this is really interesting. We have to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see. Being very careful not to criticize them, comment, bring up their indiscretions. It's easy to do, right? Well, if you didn't do this, I would have done that. Anybody? Anybody? We're not doing pinball recovery here. I'm ricocheting off of this, and I hit that, and that light went off, and we got tilt that happened over here. See what you did? That caused me to do what I did, right? And we don't do that. And what we really don't do is bring up page 417, that nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And obviously, you're there to teach them something, and you're welcome for the lesson. And if they were more spiritually fit, they wouldn't be offended by what God was trying to teach them by using you as an instrument in their life. So you're welcome. That's how we can spin shit. We hear it all the time. Like when you sit in meetings, it's like, what? Like, did you hear what just come out of your mouth? Obviously, you didn't do a 4. Okay, so their defects may be glaring. What defects? Their resentments, their fear, their harms, their conduct. It may be glaring that they're still kind of snarling at you when you look at you. Anybody have that for a while? People just give you the death stare. You're waking up smiling, 2 weeks sober, and they're just pissed because the rent ain't paid yet. But man, God's got this. I'm going to kill somebody. Happy, a lot of people around us are not happy that we've become happy all of a sudden. Well, they're still smarting from our injustices, right? Anybody? And whatever you do, don't go start working on them now that you found the answer. Right? Anyway, I remember doing that once. I remember before I got well, is opening page, 62 to 63, right? It talks about the actor and leaving it on the nightstand for somebody to read, but they never got around to it. I mean, my life would be so much better if they weren't like this. Anybody? It didn't dawn on me that I was the one they were talking about. Took me the 4th and 5th step to see that. So, here we go. But the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So that's where they get that. Oh, what's my part? What's my part? So part, fault, conduct, the role you play, how it initiates. I think those words are interchangeable. Like, how did you set the ball rolling? How are you carrying this? Is really what we get out of it. How did you create this scenario? What's your involvement in it? Right? So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation. What step is that? Step 11. All the way through here, it's been asking us to pray, seek counsel, ask for help, get right on this situation before we act on it. Right? Get right means back in the 4th step, when they finish the resentments, are we willing to set these matters straight? Where? In ourselves. The whole thing is about setting the matter straight. Because remember on page 60, 62, 60, driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion. Now I'm not driven by those things, and I see clearly what's caused all my problems. Right? Made decisions based on self that later placed me in a position where I couldn't see that before the 4th step. Oh, I'd be able to do the head nod and, oh, yes, I get it. I can't see it because there's too much self in the way. But as I got the spiritual lens in my life, I call it the God lens, where I see things from a different view, and I'm able to see it because it doesn't cripple me anymore because I'm doing it on a spiritual basis instead of a self basis. Before I couldn't look at myself because it would cripple me emotionally, mentally, right? The inability to see the truth in how I am. But through a spiritual lens, I have the spiritual footing or foundation, right? So, which is really interesting. So we clean house with the okay. Asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. So what are we asking each morning? And we review at night when part of the disciplines is, were we kind and loving toward all? I'm 36 years sober and I still miss the mark. I know it's hard to believe. I get closer every night though. Every night I get so close to a perfect day. And then I wake up and they move the line again. Every day the goalpost lines get moved. Right? It looked like an easy touchdown. But then they move the lines like a 10-yard penalty. I'm back again, starting over. So anyhow, Here we go. So, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. Huh. Isn't that interesting? Keep your mouth shut. Right? Everybody knows how fast talkers we are. Anybody here? We spin shit all the time. They're tired of it. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. How many people talk to people excessively about how well they are and how sick they are? We do it in meetings, for God's sake. Anyway, we'll leave that for another day. Oh, man. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. They will change in time. They, too, will start to experience the promises in their life as the result of the shit you're doing in your life. How did most of them get that way is from the stuff you were doing. It emotionally affected and traumatized a lot of people around us, right? It's like walking through a paint shop. You're going to get some on you. And when you're walking around throwing a paint bucket, the place is not going to look very good, right? So it's going to look like one big collage. Okay, they will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. So if they can't talk to you and you're still blowing up and you're still acting like an asshole, and you're still bringing up the past every time you get a chance and you're punishing them, and you're still, right, making them pay penance and you're still doing all that stuff, then how well are you going to do, right? So leading by example is the hard part here, right? So, oh my God, they will change our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. There are some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we honestly say to ourselves that we could right them. If we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people have passed, some people have died, and we just send them like a letter, right? And you go by the funeral, go by the water, and you have a moment with them, right? And you're just about healing and letting go of that energy we attach to and stuff like that, right? And there may be some reasons for valid reasons for postponement in some cases, right? That's where you and your sponsor come in, right? Or preparation, right? We should be sensible. We don't delay if we can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. If we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we haven't started the development yet, but we're preparing, right? And as we prepare and go through these things, life will start showing you things at the time you may not understand. I remember this one time when I was in Toronto. When I turned myself in and I was doing the John Howard Society bail thing once a week, and I had the phone and I was getting getting discouraged, right? I was going to meetings trying to find people to work with. I was getting discouraged. And I remember I ended up in this part of, I don't know how I ended up in this part of Toronto that I've never really been. I was standing on Finch and Eglinton, say. I don't even know if they run, but I'm standing at this bus stop waiting for the bus to come. It was late at night. I went to a meeting, and it started raining a bit, drizzling, and it was a clear night, which was weird. So I went over, I walked about 15 feet, and there was like a little bus shelter, glass bus shelter. Right? And I'm looking down at the ground because, when you're feeling happy, joyous, and free, that's where you're usually staring at your feet. So I'm staring at my feet, muttering to God that he's not doing his part, looking after, because I'm not seeing the results that I think I should be seeing, right? Because there's my vision for me, and then there's God's vision for me, and I get my vision mixed up with God's sometimes, and I try to tell him he's dropping the ball and he's not holding up his part of the bargain, and I start getting agitated with God. So I walk into this bus shelter, and there's some weeds and stuff growing, and I see something shiny. There's something like little shiny over in the corner. So I walk over and I pick it up. It's a Zappo lighter. And on the lighter was a ship going through with a lighthouse. And when I looked at it, I intuitively realized my problem was I was looking at the obstacles instead of looking at the lighthouse. And that was the message I got by picking up a lighter on the ground in the middle of nowhere, that my problem is I was looking at all the obstacles. I wasn't looking at the source, the light, the power. And that lighter I ended up giving the lighter away because it's not about the lighter, it was about the message I got in that moment that keep me moving on. Same when I was 12-stepping in the thing. When I seen that guy all full of pain and all full of track marks and just with that hopeless dead look in his eyes, and he asked me what I was doing there. He says, "Man, you look way out of place here. What are you doing? You look like a bright light in this place." And I was able to share with him over by the cells bars what I was doing there. His introduction to me and God's introduction to him was, I don't know why they put us together, but that got me through that night and a couple other days by talking to him until I got bail. Other times, as I was going through difficult times, situations would present themselves that I would find a newcomer, I'd find somebody to work with. Even though it was kind of weird. And I've watched that happen with other people's lives, right? Their moment of hesitation. So there was another guy, and he worked in the film industry. I don't usually take day calls. This was quite a while ago, just for a day, whatever. So the phone rang, and I'm not supposed to take day calls, but the phone said, "Hey, Tony, do you want to they need somebody over at this, at one of the studios. Do you mind going over there ASAP, right?" And I usually say no, right? But I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll go over." Something said, obviously, there's something. I said, "Obviously, God, you want me doing something?" Because I don't usually get these calls. So I said, "Okay, I'll go." So I go walking into the studio. It's a gigantic warehouse. I'm talking to God. I said, "I don't know why you want me here or why I'm coming here, but there must be a reason for it." So as I walk through the one door, it opens the next door. My eyes are still adjusting from the light outside. And in the middle of the studio and the stage, I see this big flat of plywood. It was just dropped off there, and I go walking in. And as I got closer, the guy goes, "Oh my God, you're kidding me. I can't believe it." It was another AA member sitting on that pile of lumber asking God for direction. He says he was lost and his life was just at a turning point, and he didn't know whether he was asking for a sign in some direction. There's 16,000 members in our union. Coincidence? But it was enough for him to realize by him sitting there praying, having alone time, and then I come walking in. It was pretty wild stuff, eh? Like pretty different stuff. And so another time, so sometimes, like when Ebby got the call with Bill, right? Something in Ebby's heart, right? The intuitiveness said, "Give Bill a call." Ebby didn't know Bill was in treatment asking for help and direction, that he was at the lowest point of his life, that he sent out a call to the universe heard it, passed it on to Ebby took the call and showed up in Bill's life. How many people's lives has that happened to here? Something happened out of the ordinary that has you, like I call it pinball recovery, right? How one thing bounces you into another thing, and the spiritual bumpers, they're called, right? You don't know how they enter, but they move you in a different direction and line you up with a different person. And so that's the same thing with the nines. You don't know how these nines are going to impact other people in their healing. Right? And so as you go, part of there is the demonstration that people are going to see, they know how you used to be, and they see how you are. There may be somebody in their life that might benefit from them talking to you. Which is pretty remarkable when you think about that opportunity, that a lot of us are here through the opportunity of another person, yes? An intervention or something happening beyond our understanding, right? So as we move through this and we're engaged in 11, we're working with other people, we're trying to find some help, and we don't find the answers that we're looking for. Sometimes just showing up at a meeting or finding somebody new to work with will give us the strength and the answer we need for any situation happening in the future. So yeah, I think it's pretty remarkable stuff, and I think I know that the most remarkable part of my development happened in my 9th step, not so much with people, places, and things, but with my relationship with a power greater than myself, watching how God showed up in my life to make these things possible. And that's where your experience has to come in, because I can't give you my experience, but I could talk to you about it. And most of the time when we talk about it is, how did God show up? Where's God's fingerprints in this? It's like when I went to Quebec to go visit my family. I'll close with this story. And I had to go see them, and I really was talking myself out of it, right? I really was. Because in my mind, I didn't think they liked me too much, and I wasn't going to go there, but I had to go make amends. So this is before I turned myself in Toronto, and I had to take a bus across Canada. So from British Columbia, Canada to Quebec. And everywhere along the line, I was asking God for direction, right? And help. And at the last part of the bus trip, I kind of started talking to God again, right? I was sitting in front of the bus. That's where they told me to sit. You don't sit in the back, you sit in the front. So I'm sitting, because we all know what happens in the back of the bus, right? So I'm talking to God, and I'm saying, God, again, you let me down. I can't believe you did this. I'm listening to the grapevine tapes, recordings, and my hands are in the air. I'm agitated. This lady beside me, she gives me a little nudge, and I take my headphones off. She goes, "You okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I got to go visit my family. I haven't seen them in a long period of time. I don't think they like me too much, but I got to go make this thing kind of amends." She goes, "Oh, yeah, I know what you mean." She says, "I had to do that. I'm a long-time member of Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 20 years. The last journey of that process, God placed somebody right beside me, and my inability to see that because I was stuck in self. Once I broke that cycle of focusing on self, I was able to see that God had somebody with me all the time. So live long and prosperous. May the force be with you. And I think next week, me and Ray are going to start right from the beginning here. We're going to tag team this thing together. Live long and prosperous. And let's close with the serenity prayer. We'll have some questions and answers after. What makes this all possible? God. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.